This is Princess Naomi, once the jewel of the kingdom, radiant, adored, and wrapped in every comfort a royal life could buy. From the moment she was born, drums beat and banners rose. The palace sang her name. The people called her their bright star. But a secret lived behind the music and the laughter, a quiet hunger that started small and slowly, almost without notice, became her whole world. Naomi was loved so fiercely that love itself became a cage. Whenever she smiled, a feast appeared. Whenever she cried, a tray arrived. Food was not only her comfort, it became her company. Steaming bowls of soup, skewers sizzling with spice, mountains of golden rice, sweet pastries dripping with honey. The cooks prepared them day and night. "Let the princess eat," the king would say, proud as though her appetite were a royal gift. And the palace obliged. The legend grew. Naomi could eat more than any man in the halls. Children watched her at the table the way others watched dancers, with awe. At first, it felt like a fairy tale. The sun seemed to shine in the palace courtyards just for her. By 10, she was the darling of Umudiki. People bowed. Women blessed her. Gifts arrived in crates and chests. Her laughter rang across the marble and spilled into the gardens. But as the years passed, that same adoration blinded those around her. The whispers from the edges of the court, at first soft, then sharper, went unheard inside the palace. "She eats too much," some mothers warned their daughters. "Do not let your pleasures make you slaves," other elders murmured. But the king swept those words away the way he would sweep crumbs from the table. He loved his daughter. His love was his truth. Slowly, almost without warning, Naomi's body changed. Her beauty remained, a glow in her skin, the shape of joy in her smile, but it was hidden beneath a new heaviness. Clothes that once fit now strained. Gowns had to be recut from rolls of fabric stitched together. Where she once danced with ease, each step became a small labor. At the new yam festival, the drums called for grace and celebration, but Naomi could not keep pace. Her breath came short. Her feet faltered. The crowd clapped politely, but their eyes were no longer soft. They were puzzled. They were disappointed. The whispers spread like dry leaves in wind. "Our princess cannot dance anymore." Humiliation began to live in the corners of Naomi's heart. 1,000 small rejections gathered inside her. Suitors who stopped visiting, children who turned her laughter into mimicry, maidens who pointed behind closed fans. Once the world adored her, and now the world watched her as a lesson. One night, alone before a giant mirror, she met her reflection for the first time in truth. There she saw the map of every comfort she had ever taken as right. She saw cheeks heavy with sadness. She saw curves shaped by consolation, and a hunger that wouldn't leave. Naomi wept until the pillow was soaked. She asked the echo of the room a question that would become the hinge of her life. How did I become like this? Dawn brought the answer she did not yet know how to accept. She went to her father, eyes red and raw. King Zanga, who had sheltered and spoiled her, listened with a silence that felt like the first honest thing he had offered in years. "My jewel," he said, voice breaking in a way Naomi had never heard. "Change is not easy, but determination conquers all. If you are willing, I will help." That moment was simple, hand-given, not to punish, but to support. It was a hand that placed a choice before Naomi. She could sink deeper into the ease that had created her chain, or she could step out and fight for herself. She chose the harder road. The palace bell rang, and a new rhythm took hold. Dawn whistles replaced the music that used to wake her. Trainers, doctors, and cooks, once makers of abundant feasts, became guardians of a different kind. Okafor, the trainer, was a tall man with a stern voice and kind eyes. He taught Naomi that strength begins with the footstep you refuse to skip. Her first day, asked to jog, she managed a single painful lap and fell. Tears of shame and exhaustion mingled with sweat. "I cannot do this," she cried. "It's too much." Okafor did not scold. He only said, steady and unshaken, "Rome was not built in a day." She rose again and again until the morning bent and became a practice of returns. The cooks, once architects of indulgence, remade themselves into curators of discipline. Platters of deep oil and sugar were replaced by bowls of fruit, tall calabashes of water, and plates of lean, slow-cooked meals. Naomi learned to eat like she was gathering fuel rather than consolation. The temptation did not vanish. It waited, steaming and fragrant, in every corridor that remembered her old life. One night she crept into the kitchen. A tray of fried plantains sat there, golden and irresistible. She ate more than she intended, and the guilt cut through her like a cold hand. She sank to the floor, sobbing. "I am weak," she whispered into the tiles. The next morning she expected anger. Instead, Okafor placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "Falling is part of the journey. Strength is measured by how many times you rise." Those words lit something fierce inside her. So she rose. Days became months. Months turned into a year that shimmered with labor. Naomi's life rearranged itself into sound and motion. The sharp whistle, the rhythm of her steps, the clink of lighter gowns on hangers being altered to fit a smaller, stronger frame. The palace watched with the restless curiosity people reserve for miracles in process. Some mocked, "She will not last." Others, those with eyes that had learned to look past the surface, began to nod and whisper encouragement. Children who once mimicked her heavy steps now cheered as she passed by. The world that had once turned away softened. It was not a straight path. There were mornings when blisters and tenderness made her wish to retreat to the dream of endless feasts. There were nights when a cake's scent walked like a phantom through the halls, and she found herself following it as if it were memory itself. But slowly the scales shifted. Naomi's breath steadied, her legs carried her further, her gowns were altered down again and again. She found new muscles in places she had forgotten existed. She learned to say no to the things that had once given her ease. It was not about denial. It was about reclaiming choice. Transformation changed more than her silhouette. It shifted the axis of her life. When she first walked through the market in a simple wrapper, hair tied back, the world paused. Women set down baskets. Men stopped mid-sentence, mouths open. The same people who once whispered now stood and clapped. Naomi bowed her head, but inside a steady pride had begun to grow, not the vanity of jewelry and praise, but a quiet, hard-earned confidence. Her father saw it too. "My jewel," he told her one evening, "you have found your strength." His words were not for the crowd. They were for the small, brave thing in her that had persisted. As Naomi grew stronger, her heart began to notice what strength uncovered, not only freedom from food, but freedom to choose the life she wanted. Suitors returned, bringing gifts and promises. They lined the palace gates as if the past never happened. But Naomi had learned to read between the ribbons and the gold. She remembered the empty benches, the doors closed when she was mocked, the silence of those who left when she most needed them. Wealth glittered, but it did not catch her eye. Love that abandons you when you stumble is not love at all. Then came the messenger who had once stood where many had chosen to pass. He arrived not with diamonds, but with fruit and a letter. The letter said this: "A queen's worth is not measured by her body, but by the strength of her spirit. You are beautiful, Princess Naomi, not because of your size, but because of the light you carry inside you." The hand that wrote those lines belonged to Prince Chiki of Udana, a man known for quiet wisdom rather than riches. Where the other suitors shouted and displayed, Chiki offered steadiness. He walked the gardens with Naomi, listened to the stories that had carved her, laughed at small things with her, and treated her struggles with reverence rather than pity. Watching him be present altered the measurement she used for worth. Prince Chiki spoke to the parts that had been bruised, not just the parts the world applauded. "You fought a battle most could never face," he told her once. "That is beauty no gold can buy." He did not bring kingdoms or cattle as bargaining chips. He brought time, attention, and the courage to see her whole self. In him, Naomi began to understand that true companions do not step away in shame or laugh in public. They stand beside you when the music stops and the mirrors lie. The court, however, did not quiet so easily. Advisers argued that a richer alliance would secure the kingdom. Voices from within the council worried for power and influence, not for the shape of Naomi's happiness. But a moment came when the king, looking at the woman who had become more than his pampered child, asked her plainly, "My jewel, do you choose wealth, power, or love?" Naomi's answer was simple, steady, and true. "I want love that remains when the world mocks me. I want someone who stood when I fell." The court gasped. The world shifted. The wealthy suitors stammered. The choice Naomi made was a quiet revolution, to be loved for the courage she had found, not for the lightness of her waist. When the day of celebration arrived, it was not a display of wealth meant to overwhelm. It was a celebration of something far rarer: endurance. People came with drums and voices, yes, but the heart of the ceremony was simple, a testimony to what had been learned. As Naomi stepped into the sunlight in a white wrapper trimmed with coral beads, there was something about her that silenced even the most cynical. She had defeated the habit that had once defined her, not by punishment, but by patient, stubborn choice. The crowd, once quick to scorn, now cried and cheered. "Long live Princess Naomi," they called. But Naomi held the larger prize, a clarity in herself that no applause could undo. That night, standing on the palace balcony with Chiki, she looked over the kingdom that had once loved her for ease and now admired her for struggle. "I once thought food was my joy," she whispered to him. "I once thought beauty was my worth. Now I know the truth. My joy is discipline. My worth is in my strength." Chiki kissed her brow and replied, "And that is the beauty no one can ever take from you." Their hands met, and the story did not end with a crown or a wedding feast. It continued in the small, daily choices that shape a life. She had become a queen not because of a crown, but because she had conquered herself. Princess Naomi's journey spread across kingdoms, not as a tale of shame, but as a legend of resolve. Mothers would tell it to daughters, not to warn them away from pleasure, but to teach them that comfort without limits can become a chain. Fathers would whisper it to sons, reminding them that true honor is found in standing beside the fallen. And in the market squares and in the hush of nighttime, people began to understand a deeper truth, that discipline is not denial, but freedom, that the hardest battles are often with ourselves, and that love worth keeping is the kind that stays through the fall. So remember Naomi not as the princess who ate too much, but as the woman who learned to rise. Let her story be a light for anyone weighed down by an old comfort or a habit that hides pain. Change begins with a single, breathless step forward, then another and another, until the drum beat of your own feet writes a new song. And if this story touched something in you, share it. Tell someone else that even the heaviest burdens can be lifted when courage chooses to keep climbing. The morning after the celebration, the kingdom of Umudiki felt different. Markets hummed with a quieter kind of noise, not gossip, but respect. Where once Naomi's name was used as a warning, now it was whispered as hope. Everywhere she walked, people bowed not to her crown, but to her courage. Yet Naomi knew that transformation never truly ends. Change is not a mountain you climb once. It is the ground you choose to walk every day. So she rose early, even after the festivals were done. She still ran, still prayed, still chose restraint when abundance tempted her. Her body had changed, yes, but the greater change lived inside. Discipline had replaced desire as her guide. Rumors of her journey traveled across the borders of the kingdom. Travelers carried her story to distant lands, to Udana, to Oba, to the great cities by the river where merchants traded spices and silk. Among those who heard was a queen who had known Naomi's mother. She wrote to the palace, asking Naomi to visit and speak to her daughters. The letter said simply, "Teach them what it means to be strong in spirit." Naomi read the words and smiled. Once she had eaten to fill emptiness. Now she would speak to fill others with courage. Her father agreed, proud and trembling with the knowledge that his daughter had become the lesson he could never have taught. The journey to Udana took 3 days by carriage. The road twisted through forests and sun-washed plains. Every village along the way sent people to watch her pass. Some carried gifts of fruit and flowers, others simply waved, their eyes bright with something like belief. By the time she reached the court of Queen Amaka, songs had already been written about her. Queen Amaka greeted her warmly, but her eldest daughter Mireia looked skeptical. Mireia had grown in luxury, much like Naomi once had. She wore jewels that glittered like raindrops and moved with the lazy grace of one who had never been tested. During the feast that night, she leaned toward Naomi and said softly, "Everyone praises you for losing weight, but what is so heroic about refusing food?" Naomi smiled, not in pride, but in understanding. "My dear," she said gently, "the heroism is not in the hunger. It is in the will to stop feeding the thing that hurts you." The hall fell silent for a heartbeat. Then Queen Amaka clapped her hands and said, "Let these words be written down. My daughters must learn them by heart." That was the beginning of Naomi's new purpose. She traveled through many lands, teaching what no book could, that comfort without control becomes captivity, that beauty without balance is brittle, and that strength begins the moment you face yourself. Months turned into a year. When Naomi returned home, the kingdom was thriving. Her people were healthier, her servants lighter in spirit, and her father, older, quieter, had taken to spending his evenings in the garden she used for training. He told her, "You brought more than honor to our name. You brought wisdom to our walls." But with her rising fame came new shadows. Some noblemen whispered that Naomi had become too proud, too independent. Others feared that her influence among the people might shift power from the court to the common folk. A council of elders gathered secretly and sent her a letter, gilded with formality, poisoned with doubt. They demanded that she choose a husband within 3 moons, or they would select one for her. At first, Naomi was calm. Then anger rose, not the anger of vanity, but of injustice. Had she fought so hard only to become property again? She walked to her father and placed the letter before him. "Will you let them cage me once more?" she asked. King Zanga read the letter slowly. His hands trembled as he set it down. "My jewel," he said, "a kingdom runs on rules, but rules mean nothing without fairness. You will not be forced, you will choose." Naomi bowed her head, grateful, but the council was not satisfied. They began to stir unrest, claiming that Naomi's strength made her unfit to obey tradition. And so the test of her heart began. Prince Chiki returned to the palace during that storm of rumor. He had been away in Udana, building wells and schools, living the quiet service he believed in. When he saw Naomi again, he said nothing at first, only looked, seeing not the change in her body, but the steadiness in her eyes. Then he said, "You look like the truth feels, clear and strong." She laughed softly. "The truth is heavy," she answered, "but it sets you free." Together they faced the council. The chamber was filled with silk-robed men who had once bowed before her. Now they studied her like a puzzle they could not solve. One elder said, "You have become proud, princess. You think you are wiser than our laws." Naomi's voice did not tremble. "I have become responsible, not proud. I am living proof that change is possible. If our laws deny change, then they deny life itself." Her words echoed through the hall. Even the torches seemed to burn brighter. When the meeting ended, some elders left in silence. Others stayed, moved by her courage. Outside, the people who had gathered to wait broke into song. They sang her name, not as a princess, but as Naomi the Strong. That night, Chiki found her on the balcony where they once spoke of joy and strength. "Do you regret speaking so boldly?" he asked. Naomi shook her head. "If truth angers them, it means it was needed." He smiled. "Then you are ready to lead, not just live." The next moon rose over a kingdom changed again. King Zanga announced his retirement, naming Naomi as heir. The council could not object. The people themselves had already accepted her as their heart. At her coronation, she wore no heavy crown, only a simple band of gold. She looked out over the crowd and said, "I once thought the greatest power was being served. Now I know the greatest power is serving others. I once thought strength was being praised. Now I know strength is standing when no one claps." The square erupted in cheers. Naomi looked toward the horizon, where years ago she had run, breathless and afraid. Now she stood still, unshaken. After the ceremony, when the drums quieted and the torches dimmed, Naomi and Chiki walked through the gardens together. He asked, "What will you do now, my queen?" She smiled. "I will build schools for those who believe they are too weak to begin. I will send teachers to every village where shame hides potential. And I will remind every girl who listens that self-worth is earned by patience, not perfection." Chiki nodded. "Then the kingdom will rise with you." Seasons passed. Naomi kept her promise. Under her rule, Umudiki flourished, not in gold or conquest, but in the quiet wealth of well-fed children and open minds. She became a symbol across the lands, not the princess who lost weight, but the queen who lifted her people. When the bards sang her story, they no longer began with beauty, they began with courage. And whenever someone asked her how she achieved so much, she answered with the same gentle truth, "I did not change to be loved. I changed because I finally loved myself enough to begin." Years later, when age silvered her hair and slowed her steps, Naomi would still rise before dawn. She would walk to the balcony, breathe in the air that smelled of rain and earth, and whisper a prayer of gratitude. For every struggle, every whisper, every night of doubt, they had all been teachers. She had not been cursed by her weakness. She had been called to overcome it. And in the quiet that follows every great storm, her voice would drift across the courtyards like a promise. Remember me not for how I looked, but for how I refused to give up. Remember me not for what I owned, but for what I learned to let go. For every person who carries a burden too heavy to name, know this: you are not broken. You are becoming. The wind would carry her words beyond the palace walls, through the villages, over the rivers, across the mountains, until they found the hearts that needed them most. And somewhere, far away, a young girl sitting in the quiet would lift her head, wipe her tears and whisper to herself, "If Princess Naomi could rise, so can I.